Good day, and welcome to the second day of the Conference on Ethics and Explainability for Responsible Data Science, hosted by the two research groups DSAD and PRIME from UJ and the University of Moncton, respectively. Yesterday, we had very interesting presentations, and I'd like to just touch on some of the details of what was presented, which I believe led to important topics of inquiry and research. Our opening speaker, Prof. Saurabh Sinha, set the stage for the presentations that we had the rest of the day. He highlighted that the fourth industrial revolution is not just about the technologies that exist, but rather a blend between these technologies and society. And as such, he encouraged a transdisciplinary approach to our current problems. Elements that he commented on with regards to this are, for instance, the accelerated growth of science and technology. So due to data, computing, and communication tools, there's an abundance of different kinds of elements that have actually led to this growth. Firstly, the different kinds of data that we have, multiple different kinds, enormous improvements in our computing abilities, and with multiple communication tools, a constant flow of information. And these have all encouraged basically a growth in our society in many different ways. And in fact, I think it's led to a need for a deeper awareness of the issues around privacy, fairness, and transparency, just to name a few elements. He also noted a new kind of data that's emerging due to the compounded effect of multiple algorithms that pull different kinds of data sets together to create something new. He also mentioned the ethical concerns which arise due to the generation of such information or data sets, which can have unforeseen consequences for the individual and society if not managed responsibly. He also referred to the issues companies such as Facebook and Google are facing, where political issues related to policy development and creation are coming to the fore. Readily available data and easy access to data have made the need for policies that support individual rights so much more important. In fact, the need and complexities of policy development were highlighted for me during a later presentation by Professor Joshua Bengio. In his presentation, Prof. Bengio considered the responsibility of governments towards the development of AI for social good. He commented on the fact that AI research is enabling powerful tools, which can be either oriented towards nefarious or towards beneficial purposes. Like in the area of climate change, he said, for instance, market forces and profit maximization are not always well aligned. In fact, the collective interests of society when it comes to the development of AI for social good are not always taken into account. The government's responsibility, he said, that concerns different elements. Firstly, the protection of the public with regards to ethical regulations when it comes to AI, but also then incentivizing the development of AI applications that have great societal value, but they're not sufficiently appealing when it comes to profit, and thus they require government investments. He also noted that regarding regulations, we need increased transparency. What I took away from his presentation was that, and I'll be quoting Spider-Man's uncle here, with great power comes great responsibility. So with great AI tools comes greater ethical considerations and a greater need for there to be consistent checks and balances in place. We need some form of oversight in essence. And his argument was that this may be provided by appropriate democratic governments. Mark Parsons gave our second plenary of the day, and he discussed evolving ethics in research data science. He reviewed the fundamental considerations of ethical data management, sharing, and analysis, basically why it is scientifically and ethically necessary to share data, while at the same time it might be necessary to constrain the access to this data, especially in an interdisciplinary context. He went further and he actually pulled apart the different components of responsible data science with regards to the data aspect and the human aspect. In terms of the data, he commented on findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. In terms of the human aspect, he commented on collective benefit, so the benefit for society, authority of control with regards to data governance, for instance, as well as the responsibility and the ethical aspects that come into play here. He argued that data, information, and knowledge sharing is essential to understanding and addressing the critical interconnected challenges facing society, whether we're speaking about the current pandemic that we are all facing or even climate change. In fact, Mark suggested that we need new forms of knowledge production, which must be deliberately more diverse and inclusive. So not just sharing across disciplines, but also in fact across professions, cultures, and fundamental ways of knowing. In this manner, his idea was that we could foster a culture of collaboration and community rather than the competition that is common in science. In fact, my experience, I would say, is that this competition he spoke of doesn't just exist within a field, but rather across different fields. And in fact, this easily cuts us off from the opportunity for cross-disciplinary research. And more importantly, I think it also stops us from having the ability to attain a holistic context for the difficulties we face and the solutions that we need to create. In his concluding remarks, Mark quoted Jay Stoyanovich, who said, all traditional evils of discrimination and many new ones exhibit themselves in the data science ecosystem. A conclusion to be reached, then, is that data science must be rooted in ethics, especially since data obtains its importance from the context, i.e., all data is socially constructed, and we shouldn't forget this. Another exciting event I'd just like to mention was the panel discussion on trustworthy AI and lending, chaired by Kush Varshney from the IBM Thomas J. Watson Research Center, along with panel members Zhao Chen from CTO at Parity AI, as well as Moise Bisogi from Carnegie Mellon Africa. They examined mortgage lending approval decisions carried out by machine learning systems, as well as the various phases of the developmental life cycle from the perspective of trustworthy AI. They then critically examined the fairness, explainability, robustness, transparency, and even privacy of a solution that could be created. Of interest to me was the idea how the human perceives fairness and how this actually has meaning within this context. So it's not so much about whether trustworthy AI is objectively working for everyone, but rather that everyone feels that it's working for them personally. So in essence, you need a system that can correct a wrong. So if you get rejected for a mortgage, are you then provided with an explanation that allows you to try again? In this way, we've basically set up a structure where a system's ability to correct itself can support its trustworthiness. I'd also like to highlight a presentation by Alta de Waal on the evaluation of XAI as an enabler for fairness, accountability, and transparency. The authors considered the gap between the explanations generated by XAI and then questions related to, for example, discrimination against minority groups, who should be held accountable for the decision involving a machine learning system, or whether users trust the system. To this end, she and her team proposed a multidisciplinary approach to consolidate explanations generated by XAI. This was the component dealt with by the ML technicians, but then also how users interpret these explanations along the guidelines of fairness, accountability, and transparency. And this is where they brought in their social scientists. They also illustrate how a XAI technique, termed most reliable explanation, is an appropriate metric to evaluate fairness and accountability by allowing for comparison of competing explanations and alternative reasoning. For me, this presentation highlighted the need for cross-disciplinary teams. In fact, I suspect that many important elements of a problem structure are neglected due to the fact that we don't have the necessary skills within a team where the individuals have similar backgrounds. As pointed out by Prof. Sinha, this conference focuses on bringing together multiple disciplines as a strategy for solving problems of relevance. I would also say that we aim to consider the importance of the human in a complex scientific and engineering process, such as an AI application. The manner in which we imprint or influence the data or guide our models in a manner that speak to our biases and ethical values. In fact, I don't think that we can ever truly structure an automated process without still having to interact with it. In essence, we can never stop thinking. Rather, it is a continuous process of reevaluation, consideration, and questioning. We need to be aware of and ask the hard questions because the growth of our technology and science demands it. And I believe that this conference has created a platform for this. Before we start today's presentation, I'd actually just like to thank certain research entities that have helped us in making this event a success. Firstly, there's the Institute for the Future of Knowledge, which has provided us with administrative, financial, and technical support during the conference. For those who are not aware, the Institute for the Future of Knowledge is a cross-disciplinary institute devoted to understanding the relationship between what we know and what will happen for the purposes of improving both. The University of Johannesburg established the IFK to further its championing of a future-oriented focus for South Africa and the wider region. An interesting upcoming event is the new appointment of Professor Arthur Mutambara as the director of the IFK, which I think will lead to very exciting new possibilities. But most importantly, I would like to thank Anthony Kasiboni, who is the Director of Research for the IFK. Anthony has been a key figure in making this conference a success. Thank you very much for your hard work, dedication, and steadfastness. I've really appreciated it. I'd also like to thank Anwar Vaad, who is the Director at NICIS, Data Intensive Research Initiative of South Africa. The NICIS provided us with funding for the postgraduate challenge that we've held. In fact, they will be offering laptops to the 2 top achievers for this challenge. We will be hearing the presentations later on today, so please do stick around and listen to those. And Anwar will also be presenting the prizes and commenting on these 2 presenters.